Airspace, how to fly safely and legally in the United States. I generated this about 2 years ago, so apologies if anything's off according to regulations or incorrect. I did go through it and double checked, and hopefully it works. We will be covering Class Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, Echo, Golf, special use airspaces, and a couple others. So let's dive in. This will take a little bit of time, so bear with me. And as always, this is for entertainment purposes only. Please speak with your own instructor, flight or ground. I am an advanced ground instructor and instrument instructor, and also I can get things wrong. So what is airspace? Basically, any air above a territory that is controlled by a nation. Airspace is treated differently in other countries. I don't know about them in detail, so don't ask me about them. Controlled airspace is basically the airspace that is either around airports or at certain altitudes where air traffic controllers in the tower or in stations are monitoring traffic flying through that airspace. And what they're really trying to do is keep traffic from colliding with each other and terrain. Mostly each other. Terrain is kind of secondary, radar and storms, time and space permitting, but they will give altitude alerts if you're below minimum safe altitude or minimum en route altitudes, those types of things, or if they're starting to lose radar contact with you. It's all in the PHAC, Chapter 15. This is also FAA Airspace 101, Aeronautical Chart User's Guide, pages 17, 22, 26, and 32 that may have changed. But in that general area, you'll find lots of great information about airspace. And yes, these links do go through to those places, but we're just going to click and go through together. So I've got a couple different slides just demonstrating US airspace. This is just to give you a rough idea of what it looks like in different formats. Some people learn from one versus another. Just look at all of them so you can kind of really wrap your head around it, because it is three-dimensional space that we're using, and there's lots of nuances between what you can and cannot do in each space. So just as an overview, we've got flight level 600, so that's 60,000 feet MSL, and that above there is actually Class Echo airspace. Again, they didn't color it in here, but that is Class Echo above there. Below it, we've got Class Alpha. Class Alpha is pretty much your IFR, instrument flight rules, flying for the majority of airlines, cargo, high performance jets. They're flying in this space and it's fully controlled by ATC. You cannot be in there without an instrument rating and current proficiency and instrument rated aircraft. There's also certain sectors in there in terms of altitudes that are called RVSM, reduced vertical separation minimums. And those are going to actually be required that your plane be certified to be in them, because it has certain equipment that is required for you to be in there, because instead of 2,000 feet separation, they have 1,000-foot separation. And they want to make sure your equipment is working properly to give the essential separation minimums so that people do not crash. Remember, that's the prerogative of ATC, is to get airplanes to and fro without hitting things. Below that, again, Class Echo, that goes from the bottom of 18,000 feet MSL, so starting from 17,999er and down, and you'll notice it can sometimes go all the way down to the ground. See how it's the blue is taking it all the way to the surface. It can also go 700 feet AGL or 1,200 feet AGL, and then can also end in like that with still the Gulf right underneath it. Go into Bravo. Bravo, think big. Bravo is all your big airports, your international massive hungamungas. So your LAX, your Seattle, Boston, Orlando, big ones, Miami, they're all going to be big. Actually, Orlando, I'm not even quite sure. Check on that one for me. Don't fly too often out there. It might be a Class Charlie because it's underneath Miami's International Class Bravo. Class Charlie is a smaller version of this, what is referred to as the wedding cake, because it has multiple tiers. This is more of like a birthday cake and a fancy birthday cake or a budget wedding cake, however you want to see it. Class Charlie is also referred to as commercial. We'll get into that a little bit more. So it just is how many passengers and IFR approaches are made into them, kind of defines how ATC ends up planning and adjusting and creating these different classes. Also, like I said, airports like Oakland sit under San Francisco's Class Bravo. It's way busier for San Francisco, so that ends up being a Bravo airport. and Oakland just kind of sits under it as a Class Charlie airport. Moving on, we have Class Delta. Class Delta is demanding, is what some people will say that you want to remember it as. It has a control tower that's most of the time shuts down at night, especially with staffing shortages and just volume of traffic. So then it converts into a Class Echo airport where the Echo goes all the way to surface, or a Class Gulf where Gulf ends up being having like a 1,200 foot or a 700 foot AGL above it. And that is going to be your Class Delta. Finally, Gulf. Gulf is the go for it, as John King of John and Martha King Schools has referred to it before. That's pretty much go anywhere, do anything. Again, do it with safety in mind. You're not invincible. It's one of the hazardous attitudes, is thinking that you're invulnerable. Definitely treat Gulf like you would any other airspace, and treat it with respect and flight precision. This is another one. This one comes out of the FAA's Aeronautical Chart User's Guide. I like this one a lot because it shows what some of the colors are on the VFR chart. So the sectional, you'll see solid blue lines for marking out where all the Class Bravo is. You'll see solid magenta lines for Class Charlie, dash for Delta. You'll see these surface extensions sometimes be in magenta dash. And then you'll have this hazy, faded, whatever, magenta, which pretty much showcases that there is there's a transition, that this is actually a 700 foot AGL floor of Class Echo coming down, and then you see it goes all the way to the surface because the dash line right there, the magenta is Class Echo on the surface, but the hazy outside means it's going to be Gulf then after that. And you can see some other Gulf over here where you have these hazy blues. These hazy blue lines suggest that it will be starting at 1,200 AGL all the way up to potentially 14,500 MSL, and then it becomes Class Echo again. Again, Class Alpha there, Class Echo above the 60,000 feet. We ain't flying in that. Don't you worry about that space. Okay, Class Alpha airspace, Class A. I always say Class Alpha. It's pretty much, as I said, high-speed jets are going to be flying in this high-performance aircraft. You can have some turboprops up there. You may be able to get some pistons up there on oxygen and pressurized, ideally, but you're mostly going to be seeing jets in that space and some turboprops. Do you have to be IFR rated and equipped and on an IFR flight plan, which I did not say before? You have to be an IFR flight plan and activated, and you've picked up your clearance and you're ready to go. Do not just roll into Class Alpha, or otherwise you're going to be in a world of hurt with a Brasher report phone call number to copy down. There are no cloud clearances because you're on an IFR flight plan, so there's no point in dodging clouds. You just want to dodge thunderstorms and anything that may have turbulence while you're up there. Otherwise, you can go through clouds. We already talked about what its heights are. You do have to have the equipment of a ADSB-Out 1090 extended squitter. You cannot use the 975, 978, whichever one that is, megahertz that you can use in Class Echo and other airspaces. You need the higher performance extended squitter. And you go to a pressure altitude of 299er. Just kidding, 299er2. And then 1013.21 if you're going to do in millibars. That is just so everyone's on the same barometer, and that where when you're crossing pressure gradients, you're going to be roughly at the same separation altitude. If you're at flight level 390 and someone's at 380, you're going to be separated from each other. Again, like I said, RVSM, dive into that. It's a really interesting topic. You do need special training, equipment, and approval for your aircraft to go into those airspaces. So learn about it if you ever want to fly up there. It's going to be better other than being limited at 280 because you don't have it. Now you're burning all that extra fuel, especially if you're in a jet, because you want to be higher. There's less friction and better performance in terms of fuel efficiency. Most epic views, yes, you can be above most weather. Sometimes storms will rip right up to almost 60,000 feet, and you're not getting over those ones. So treat them with caution. Go around about 20 miles. There are epic views. It's very cool. This photo actually is in the background that you can vaguely see is us up at altitude, probably at 450. And it's not shown on the charts because there's no point in showing it on the charts because it just covers everything. Cool. Moving into Bravo, the big boys. You need to always hear November 123 4 Romeo. Your call sign cleared into the class Bravo. Fly and maintain whatever your altitude, the heading, whatever. Just please, you have to have that. If you don't have that ATC clearance, you are not cleared into the Bravo, and you should be apologizing and correcting course safely. So it's big. It's all the big ones. It is an upside down wedding cake. Usually goes up to 10,000 MSL. Sometimes it will stop at 8,000 MSL. I believe one of them has like an 8,000 cap. Atlanta goes up to 12,500 MSL. So just check what the tops are, and we'll go into some of those symbols really soon. You do have to have that explicit ATC clearance, like I said, and you, as a student pilot, do have to have instructor endorsement, and actually a lot of them don't even let you go into them, even with the instructor endorsement. So double check the student pilot restrictions on that. I think it's 6195 alpha down there. And you do have to have two-way radio. Obviously, you're talking to them. Mode C transponder, ADSB-Out. So that's 978 megahertz or the 1090 extended squitter. This is what Denver Class Bravo looks like. Thanks, Bold Method. You make awesome stuff. Definitely follow all their content and videos and blog posts because they were instrumental in helping me get all my ratings, in addition to a bunch of other people around. Here's a depiction of, and we'll go through Los Angeles a few times because it's such a complex airspace and it has all the airspace all packed right into it. And it's local to me being in San Diego. So I wanted to use it as a demonstration site so we can start kind of understanding how this stuff gets layered. At some point, I'd love to figure out how to make a 3D model of this so you can really understand like the complexity of what's going on. But for now, we're just going to do a 2D, which is what you got on your charts, for flight, etc. Starting out the outermost part, sometimes airspace will project past the 30 nautical mile mode C ADSB out veil. That's pretty much from surface up to 10,000 or 12,500, whatever the case be, for that airport, where you have to have those two things on and functioning, operating, and reporting, sending out data, so that you are visible to ATC. Even if you're not going to be talking to ATC, you have to have that aspect. Coming over, checking out the cloud clearances. Got 3 statute miles visibility and clear of clouds. That's pretty cool. Normally you have to be a good distance away from clouds depending on the airspace and the time of day. Some other caveats too. But in Bravo, because it's so dangerous to get off and start dodging things without having ATC know what's going on, they're wanting to have a little more use of that space, but still take it with a grain of salt. You don't know what's going to pop out on the other side of a cloud. Give yourself buffers according to whatever ATC instructions you have been given. Tower controlled TRACON radar. They can provide some identification of targets and precipitation. They don't see clouds, they just see precipitation, and they'll help give you vectors around that stuff, if available and time permitting. Otherwise, you got to use your onboard radar, your pre-flight information, what you can see and not see. All that are tools in your resource management toolkit, so use them wisely. 250 knots inside Class Bravo, 200 knots under Class Bravo. So when you're in the Bravo, you can go 250 max. Of course, they'll probably ask you to slow down if you're going a certain speed because they're trying to pace and stack arrivals and departures accordingly, so they get their separation requirements according to their protocols as traffic controllers. And underneath Class Bravo, you got to be 200 knots maximum. So don't go any faster. I've definitely done this before at various times where you forget that you're taking off and you're like, oh man, I'm in a jet. I can just rip out of here. No, you still 200 knots under Class Bravo. So make sure that you're careful and you're watching out with what that airspeed is, and just have that situational awareness of what is above me? What am I in? Where am I now? It's always a great question to ask yourself as a pilot. Mode C, like I said, we talked about the veil. Class Bravo airspace, some more information. If you got ForeFlight, and I'm sure Garmin Pilot has this as well, look up the FAA catalog for the fly charts. These are awesome documents that help give you a lot of situational awareness as to what is going on with that airport. And we'll dive a little bit deeper into some of them. But what you end up having on these terminal area charts are VFR flyways. So that's this upper right-hand corner. These are basically VFR paths where you don't need to be speaking to Class Bravo. You can still get flight following. You can do all that stuff. You can request it if it's available for workload permitting. But this is pretty much to say, hey, VFR pilots coming in and out of satellite airports around this area or even just transiting this airspace, if you can fly at these altitudes above or below or whatever the requirements are, you won't bother us much because we know that they're the flyway. We understand that you're going to be on those paths. You're a bit more predictable for us, and you're not this weird person kind of just going off on their own, doing something else and confusing the hell out of us and making us scared for whatever else we're controlling. So think about that if you're going to be doing it. You also have VFR corridors. Corridors are sections within the Class Bravo where they've cut a hole and allow traffic to go through there. There'll be notes on it. We'll talk about that with a San Diego example. And then you've got transition routes. Transition routes are specific routes that are suggested for transiting through airspace. Sometimes you're going to be going through the Bravo. Sometimes you're going to be underneath the Bravo or going through a corridor. So sometimes that gets a little confusing. Just triple check, read the entire chart, look at little call outs to understand what you're doing and what you're going through. And I'll obviously have this available or at least pre-flight it so you know what you're doing. I once was scrambling trying to find a Phoenix flight chart because it's like, are you aware of the terminal area chart? I'm like, oh. And so I knew where it was, but I had to pull it up while flying to try to find this flyway, and it was irritating. So I had to kind of spin around, do a couple circuits outside of Class Bravo, and then eventually he just gave me Class Bravo clearance and was rough with me as I transited that Class Bravo. So don't do that to yourself. It's not fun to be reprimanded by ATC. Here is the flight chart for LAX. It's just a chunk of it. It actually shows all of the Bravo. But what I really wanted to focus on were the transition routes. So you see these arrows, and they have the VOR and the radial that they're connected with. So Van Nuys 125. So Van Nuys is somewhere up here, and it's radiating out on the 125 radial. And you have Seal Beach right here, SLI, on the 120 radial. So that one's coming off and going down. You've got Van Nuys 140 coming off LAX on 323 radial. So there's the LAX VOR, 323 radial. And you're going to be wanting to request these, but the caveat is these aren't underneath the airspace. These are within Class Bravo airspace. So then you're going to have to negotiate and work with the TRACON, the Class Bravo area controllers, to actually go and use these routes versus the flyways, which are all these blue routes. If you'll notice, like let's pick this one, between 4,500 and 6,500. Well, what's the shelf above you in Class Bravo? The bottom of it is 7,000 feet. So they're saying 500 feet below and 4,500 feet above is a good flyway to use if you're flying from the north to the south or the south to the north through this area. Okay? These are all helpful, predictive to get to Compton Woodley. They're saying, all right, if you're going west, fly 4,500. Remember, because all balls go east, 3,500. Use these little flyways, study this map, build it into your training profile. You're just going to make everyone's workload a lot less, including your own. So this is what I'm talking about by looking at the whole chart. This VFR transition routes on this flyway chart is all the way over to the far right. So you want to go through and read this entire thing to understand what it is that they want. And you have to obviously have authorization before you can go. You have to remain outside Bravo until you get authorization. And you want to position the aircraft in an area outside of Class Bravo airspace where ATC clearance can be normally expected with minimal or no delay. And you advise ATC of position, altitude, route name desired, and direction of flight. That way, they can be like, sweet, this person knows what they're doing. I don't have to watch them as much like a hawk, as opposed to someone going, I'm at, I'd like the route that goes over Los Alamitos, something like that. Please don't do that to traffic control. San Diego. Now, this is a little different. Notice they're still using transition route arrows, but these arrows are actually within a corridor. So if we break this down a little bit more, starting with the polygons, let's start with this bottom edge polygon, the Pogi 250 radial, coming off Pogi, making a slice out here. This whole little polygon is 10,000 feet to 4,800 feet. So 4,700, 4,799 and below, you are in Class Echo. You don't have to talk to Class Bravo and get permission. Now, as soon as you get up to this space, this one, it's like just sliced north of the bridge, kind of encompasses the shoreline from the spit over the San Diego Bay, and not so much the docks, but a little bit of the docks. Well, in here, you actually have a bottom shelf now of 2,800 feet to 3,300 feet, and then from 3,300 to 47, that's your cutaway. That's that little slice that's going through the Class Bravo. So that you're back in Class Echo now. Then starting at 4,700 feet, back up to 10,000. Remember, most Bravos go up to 10,000. Now you're back in Bravo. If we move up to the north little weird polygon, it has lots of edges that basically goes over the 27 approach end of San Diego International, you'll notice that it's surface to 3,300. Surface, obviously, because you're dealing with the surface of the airport now, and they want full control so that you're not making PSA situations happen. And up to 3,300 feet. Notice 3,300 matches the one that's south of it. So it's got that same floor, so you can fly over it. Then it begins at 4,700 feet, goes to 10,000. And notice that 47 matches pretty close to this 4,800 bottom shelf that goes over Montgomery, Gillespie, this huge 4,800 area section. That's so you can easily transition and stay at these altitudes. Now, it's got a flyway note to give you information. That note talks about how this VFR corridor works. Always gather as much information. There's tons of data. It takes a lot of time to really understand how to read these things. There's so much stuff in here. There's like a stadium marker. Then you got Hotel del Coronado, another VFR waypoint, South Point Loma waypoint. You got the highways. Stuff's everywhere. Anyway, we can see the flyway right here, where we can see that as long as you're 4,500 and below, you're good. That changes until you get to right these two polygons. It's now 3,400 to 4,600 is their suggested altitude. Now you can try to fly right at 3,301. And as my dad says, ATC's radar and altimeter reading of what your aircraft is at trumps whatever you have inside your aircraft. So even though yours might say it, whatever ATC shows, and they'll pull on the tapes to show that you're violating the Class Bravo. So buy yourself that extra room. They're even telling you to give yourself that 100 feet buffer between these shelves. But they're pretty much saying, hey, if you're going to go flying southeast, what should you be at? 3,500 feet. If you're flying northwest, what should you be at? 4,500 feet. And just keep that together and you're all good. Oh, this is sweet. My cat is giving some purrs, so maybe you can hear it. That is a VFR corridor. Again, seeing this in 3D may help even more, but that's breaking that down. I just wanted to go over that because as I did my first recording on this whole setup, I was realizing that it's so much more confusing than you'd really want it to be. But once you understand it, and always look for your notes. Breaking down some Class Bravo airspace a little more, just to show you this is all from Sporty's information and blog post. You got surface to 8,000 feet is that inner chunk for this airport. Then from 1,900 feet to 8,000, you've got this shelf. And then we go from 3,000 feet to 8,000 feet. And then finally 4,000 to 8,000 feet. is our last shelf as it extends out for this airspace. Class Charlie airspace, again, think commercial. This is a simpler wedding cake. Remember that budget wedding cake? They've got control towers, radar, approach control, and it's based on the number of IFR operations and passengers. It usually goes up to 4,000 AGL. Remember, that can change depending on what you're going to be looking at in terms of airspace on top of it. If there's no one else around, it's likely going to be 4,000 AGL is the top altitude that you're going to expect to see. And we have a 5 nautical mile radius from the surface to 1,200 feet AGL. So that's that bottom section. It's a little bit bigger than Class Delta, which is 8 nautical miles across. This is 10 nautical miles across. And then we've got a 20 nautical mile diameter, 10 nautical mile radius outer circle. And that usually goes from 1,200 AGL to 4,000 AGL. And then we also have a procedural area. That's just, if you're going to be going near a Class Charlie airspace, have your ducks in a row, get ready to be flying a procedure or understanding that there's some observations and complex stuff happening as far as 20 miles out from the airport. So just be conscious of that and professional. Class Charlie airspace is in the LA area. Note, you had all that complex Bravo with the transitions. There are flyways, but there are no corridors through Los Angeles. Well, now you've got these very complex, and note that they're not all simple shapes. You have that mostly out in the Midwest where you don't have mountains, you don't have other complex airspace sitting on top of it, or tiny little Class Delta airports right next to it, or smaller satellite airports. All this ends up being interesting geometry that you got to work with and really look at. Make sure you know, okay, well, this shelf, I got a 2,000 foot bottom of the shelf. Well, this one's 35. So by the time I get to here, I need to be at 1,900 feet if I'm going to be transitioning. And then I can be back up to 2,400 feet over here. It's very complex. And you do need to have the 3 statute miles visibility, 1,000 above, 500 below, 2,000 horizontal, which is the most common cloud distance and visibility requirements that you need to have in cloud separation. It's a good one to remember. If you forget anything, at least do that to start with. If your brain is scrambled, you do need to have two-way radio communication, but all they need to say is your call sign. So there's no clear through the Class Charlie. You only have that for Class Bravo. You can go in without endorsement as a student. Obviously, get training. Don't do that without training. And departures from satellite airports, you have to communicate with the control tower or contact the ATC facility ASAP. That way they know that you're connected and linked up. So you're not this rogue. We're not talking to them. They're at this altitude, have no idea their intentions. All those things that we do not love to hear on the radios. So as you can see, it's Burbank, Ontario, Santa Ana, and Riverside are the Class Charlies for Los Angeles. You do need to have a Mode C transponder inside and above up to 10,000 MSL. That's only within the sector. There is no Mode C ADSB-Out veil. You do need to have ADSB-Out, though, as well within the Class Charlie airspace. And like we said, not always circular. Bold Method had a good one about this Asheville regional. Because it's in a valley, it's got its approaches. There's no safety margin with these mountains quickly rising from the valley below here. So this is all they can do to make it safe. Those are the parameters that the terminal designers ended up coming up with in that setup. And they're going to provide VFR, IFR separation, 500-foot vertical separation, target resolution, and wake turbulence separation. So a lot of big airplane flying stuff, but don't rely on it. Use your own training and wits about you and situational awareness so that you don't get yourself into a pickle, unless you like pickles. Class Delta airspace, this is that demanding airspace. This is what a lot of us may start out with if we're at a busier, more dense airport. This is where you have a controlling tower. They're controlling all the runway ops, taxi, takeoffs, landings when they're operating. When they're not operating, they turn out to be a Class Echo or Gulf airport. So there's no more tower. You're talking on the Common Traffic Advisory Frequency or Unicom. And you have to be very clear in your communication and wise with how you choose to communicate in those spaces. And it's controlled airspace from the surface to 2,500 feet AGL when it is a towered airspace. Otherwise, when it's echo, it's controlled in the sense that you can talk to ATC and they can dictate what you're doing and have other communication controls. Can have custom features and heights. If you look at those San Diego ones around there for Gillespie and Montgomery, they're slightly larger or slightly smaller based on the complex airspace that surrounds those two airports. And again, they're 8 nautical miles across, and you do need to have two-way radio communications. But that again goes to just saying, hi, this is your call sign. As soon as they say your call sign, you have established two-way radio communications. Going back to Los Angeles, we see all the class deltas around there. One's even not even a circle, it's an entire rectangle. And this one's got a super weird shape. It also has a super weird shape for Zampierne Field, Santa Monica, San Gabriel. Same thing, 3 statute mile visibility. So the 3 152s, those two-way communications, and 200 knots, just like below Class Bravo, within Class Delta, 200 knots max within 4 nautical miles at 2,500 feet AGL and below. So pretty much when you're inside the majority of the Delta airspace. Now some you might be 4 nautical miles is further out here, so that might not specifically be the exact point. Just keep it slow. Makes it safer. Do not need to have a transponder. I'm still shocked about this. Maybe they'll change that at some point, but you don't actually legally have to have a transponder. They're not always circular. We talked about that based on other stuff that might be around. You saw all that stuff in the LA. Like, I only don't think a single one is circular except for these two. They happen to be circular for Long Beach and Los Alamitos. And negative signs on the altitude for the upper surface of it. If a negative, it means 3,000 is not included in it. So it goes up to 2,999 feet MSL. It is not including 3,000 feet because most likely there is a Class Bravo shelf that goes from 3,000 feet up to 8,000, 10,000, 12,500, whatever it is for that Class Bravo. And usually limited or no radar services, so do not expect it. It's situational awareness for the controllers and for radar services received from TRACON. It is not for your benefit for the most part. Don't rely on it. Don't expect it. Class Echo Airspace, it's the everywhere. It used to be less back in the day. Over time, as technology has improved and regulations have increased, it has grown more and more, which is great because it gives us availability to get a hold of ATC, have flight following, and just be safe for pilots. It's very similar to a Class Bravo in the sense that it kind of steps down, except its bottoms are either the surface, 700 feet AGL, or 1,200 feet AGL. Those are the bottom shelves. And then it goes up to, again, all the way up to 17,999 MSL. It's for the IFR traffic transiting from departure to destination. It helps with Victor Airways, VFR flight following, like I said, tons of shapes. They will support approaches, and it varies from the surface to 1799 MSL. And it resumes after class alpha ends at flight level 600 and up. So a surface on your charts, Class Echo, is going to be dashed magenta. That means Echo goes to the surface. Next, Class Echo ends at 700 feet AGL. So from there and up is Class Echo. And then the blue hazy is 1,200 feet AGL. This is all Class Echo airspace. Why do we know? Actually, it's interesting how I did this. It is the Class Echo. This is the inner 700 feet AGL. This is all the hazy magenta that you can see right around the edge. So basically everything below 699 feet AGL and below is actually Gulf throughout all here. So you can go anywhere, and we'll talk about that. This is the transition Class Echo at 700 feet AGL for Los Angeles. Class Echo airspace, we'll start at the bottom. This is actually the ground. I should have put like a ground icon or something. So from here, from 0 feet up to 10,000 MSL, so it's really at 9,999 feet MSL, because below it, you're going to require 3 152s. When you get above 10,000 feet MSL, because what happens above 10,000 feet MSL in terms of your speed, what can you now go? Go whatever your airplane goes. So you're no longer limited to that 250 knots below 10,000 feet MSL. So now, because we're moving faster aircraft through space, you need to have greater tolerances and distances away from clouds. So in case something pops out, you might have enough time to dodge whatever's coming right at you. Not going to be a fun thing if you have that happen. Below 10,000 MSL, no specific equipment is required, though it's wise to have. And at or above 10,000, you're going to have a Mode C transponder and ADSB. Again, you can have both types of ADSB out. There's no requirement for ADSB in for any of this stuff. And at or above 3,000 MSL from the coastline out 12 nautical miles over the Gulf of America, formerly known as Gulf of Mexico, still for other people. Operable ADSB out is required. So that's just protect for the Navy, potential threats, military use, commerce, oil rigs, training. It's just lots of stuff is going out over the Gulf of America. And it's not always circular. Like we said, none of this stuff is always circular. Here's a good example of Class Echo starting at 1,200 feet AGL. So this inner chunk goes all the way up to 14,500 feet. AGL, I believe. We'll find out. Yeah, MSL. So all this inside of here is actually called Class Gulf from the surface to 14.5, whereas everything out here is Class Echo from 1,200 feet because it's the hazy blue. It's go for it space in Class Gulf. You don't have any entry requirements. It's mostly surface, but not including 700 or 1,200 feet MSL, where it's deemed that if you have dash magenta around an airport, that's when you're going to have it go to the surface. Mountainous areas, you can see that dash line in there through all that green of that bold method. When we're in mountains, we can actually go from the surface up to, but not including 14,500 feet MSL, because above that is Class Echo. So we get to have Class Gulf in mountainous areas. That way you're safe if you're just a bush pilot. So give you allowance to be able to get around. And comment if there's more data that you know about that I don't know about for why that's the case. Class Gulf airspace. This is where it gets fun for cloud understanding and clearances. So 1,200 feet AGL and lower. Let's start with day. It's kind of like Bravo, except you have 1 statute mile visibility and clear of clouds. Now when it goes to night, we're back to our ubiquitous cloud clearance, 3 statute mile and 152s. So 1,000 above, 500 below, 2,000 horizontal. Then there's a caveat. If you're 1,200 feet AGL and lower, and it's night, and you're within a half mile of the airport traffic pattern, you can actually use daytime clearances and stay clear of the clouds. But that's basically assuming that you're at the airport doing pattern work and flying. That's just help you get in safely and get down the ground and be done with your day, put the plane away. Now above 1,200 AGL and lower than 10,000 MSL, we've got 1 statute mile visibility and 152s during the day. Then at night, it jumps back to the normal one, 3 152s. And then above 10,000, just like in Echo, we are now at that higher safety distance of 5 statute miles, and then 1,000 above, 1,000 below, 1 statute mile horizontal. So more than double what you get to do below 10,000 feet. And that, again, is to help us watch out for those high-speed aircraft flying around. Talking about some ADSB requirements, this is just more information that comes from AOPA around where ADSB is or is not required. Note that it's not required in Delta, below Class Bravo, or Class Charlie shelves. The only time it's required is 10,000 feet MSL and above for the continental US only. And of course, that 12 nautical miles from the coastline out from 3,000 MSL to 10,000 MSL, they want to see over the Gulf of Mexico. That's how long ago I wrote this or produced this graphic from AOPA. That's where they manage it. And again, wherever you're in Class Charlie up to 10,000, however the shape is, you're going to have a requirement of having it. And then you have your own Mode C ADSB veil, out veil around Class Bravo of 30 nautical miles from airport center. This just talks about the weather minimums. Special VFR, we haven't talked about that. Visibility has to be greater than 1 statute mile, and the pilot must request it. ATC cannot suggest it, and then ATC must give you clearance. And then day not below statute mile, clear clouds, night the same, but you have to be IFR rated and in an IFR equipped airplane to be able to pull off a special VFR. That's just sketchy. 1 statute mile, try that in a sim. Highly not recommended. Here's a visual graphic. Maybe that might help. I found this. This is Echo. Kind of shows you what the difference between the cloud requirements are. And then we've got day, night within the bowl of the G for Gulf, so you understand. So just remember that Echo and Gulf above 10, they're the same. Below 10, the nights are the same, but daytime, you get a little more leeway. And then, of course, you have that caveat if you're within a half statute mile, then you can be lower mins. Special use airspaces. These are things where cool, dangerous, high speed, sensitive nature, sensitive people, sensitive events are happening, and they come in a variety of formats. So make sure you know what the operations are allowed in there, what type of flying you can do in there, what permissions you need, therefore you don't get in trouble. This is a graph I created just to showcase how some of the icons are worked. If it's blue and hashed, it's probably you're not wanting to go in there. Probably not going to go and do anything in there. It's a little dangerous. I wouldn't recommend it. Alert areas, also dangerous, but you have a little more ability to go into them, except for national security, the temporary flight restriction areas, but usually we'll do that if you're on an IFR flight plan. This is just a way of breaking it down, do a quick cross compare of what's going on. Here are some more legends of what you're going to see on your charts depicting these areas. They also always on the right hand or left hand or around the border, they'll have information showing what each area is. So these are restricted areas with alphanumerics. There's the cat again. And it tells you how often are they used. Well, some of them are continuous. Others go from 6, I believe that's local time because that wouldn't be Zulu. So basically 6 a.m. to midnight. You've got up to 2,000 feet for restricted area 2503 Alpha. Los Angeles Center 12565 is the controlling agency contact facility. So if you wanted to see if it was hot or active or what you can go through there, I would first check these times. If you're within those times, you're probably not going to be able to go through there, so plan differently. But you can speak with Los Angeles Center. Sometimes, who knows, they may allow it, may give you some space. But check out these charts. They got a lot of great information. Diving into some of these more specifically, we've got alert areas. They're going to contain high volumes of training, parachuting, glider towing, unusual activity. This is to the northwest of Phoenix. Tons of flight training is happening here. Students are just constantly training. It's both from Luke Air Force Base. You've also got all the training that's happening from the airport. I forget which airport it is, right at the north side of there. It's off to the right that you fly and depart almost immediately into this airspace. But I hear pilots in there all the time training whenever I go over there. It is non-regulatory, so there's nothing that's saying you can't be in there, but just be very cautious or avoid altogether just because there's going to be a lot of potential for conflict. And everyone has to be responsible for their own collision avoidance. It'll be charted like this, Alpha 231. And it tells you who's continuous, what altitudes, and who's in charge. NSA areas, you got non-regulatory and compliance is voluntary. Again, check out NOTAMs, make sure they got a thicker line versus the class Echo surface line. Military operations, these as a VFR pilot, you can go through. Is it smart? Probably not. I would know what are their active times, if it's active by NOTAM, what their altitudes are. If you're on an IFR traffic though, you're most likely not going to be sent through there. We have at times been approved through flight plans to go through there. I've also had ATC get very upset with me for having planned something through that airspace. So it depends on their attitude that day. Just don't piss them off and make your flight plans go around these spaces if you're flying IFR. That way you don't ruffle the feathers. You got weird stuff happening, so just watch out. Restricted areas, this is like bombs, missiles, crazy stuff. They're not prohibited, but you have to follow specific things. I would make sure that you know specifically if you have clearance, if it's hot, to go through these things. I wouldn't mess with it. Because also when you stop it, you have to have all the military stuff that's happening during that time come to a complete halt. Or I think that's more the warning areas, maybe. One of the two. You'll have spotters who will say, oh, nope, no more firing because we have some random GA aircraft flying through this airspace. Warning areas, again, this can be over domestic and international waters or both. And then military air traffic is controlled, extends 3 nautical miles from the shore and outbound. Floors and ceilings are referenced in the chart sidebar. Basically like the other ones. You want to stay out of those if you can help it as well. Then we got some other airspaces. You've got like the SURFA, Washington Dulles 1, contiguous U.S. air defense identification zones. We'll talk about those. Military training routes. You should know about this if you're at all deep into your private pilot training, because it's one of the main questions that you kind of get is like, what is a 4-digit VR? Or what altitude is that going to be at? Well, 4 digits is 1,500 feet AGL and up. Anything that's 3 digits, IR or VR for instrument or visual, it's going to be 1,500 feet AGL and below. This is high speed, high traffic, sometimes corridors. Watch out for them. Don't fly over them. Don't be in them, especially at these altitudes. If you know it's a 3-digit route, do not be 1,500 feet AGL just chilling right on it. That's a recipe for disaster. And same for 1,500 feet AGL and above. Just parallel it. Give yourself some space and buffer. It's cool to watch it go by, but you don't want to watch it go into your eye. Exercise extreme caution, like I said. Temporary flight restrictions. Ooh, do not go on these without permission. And a discrete transponder code. This is how you get a quick join up with some military aircraft to escort you out of this zone and to talk to you on the ground, potentially arrest you. Basically safe areas. They're in NOTAMs. Know what they are. ForeFlight is cool. They will show them in ForeFlight, but again, just confirm and plot it on your own maps if you're at all confused, or fly with someone who can tell you better what's going on. And other specific ones like Disneyland, it's a permanent one, and they'll talk to you about, okay, public law. We got this law that says you cannot be flight operations below 3,000 feet AGL and 3 nautical mile radius of the Disneyland theme park. So follow the instructions. Wilderness areas. These, according to the advisory circular, are voluntary as far as I read, outside of things like Yosemite National Park because of the Public Law 191 prohibits flying. These are suggested for noise-sensitive areas for bald eagle breeding areas, wildlife areas, hikers, wildlands enjoyers. They don't want to hear planes droning on above. They want to be in the solitude and silence of nature out there. So do them that favor and just stay 2,000 feet AGL above this space. Also, bird strikes and impacts, definitely going to happen more often if you are flying lower, so be careful. Marine sanctuaries, these are similar to those. These will actually have specific rules, like this one saying that NOAA, you're violating NOAA rules by flying 1,000 feet AGL or lower, or below 8,000 feet AGL. So just give that 2,000 foot buffer as usual. Learn about them. Make sure that you're safe. And then the SURFA, I think this is the only one that exists. I'm pretty sure. Correct me if I'm wrong. This is pretty much just to make sure that sensitive things around the nation's capital are being tracked as you're coming into this basically like large 30 nautical mile Mode C Vale type thing. You're going to be on a discrete transponder. There are gates to go through. You can learn all about it. You can take your free course with a fast course. Do that, get your certification. That way you're allowed to actually fly into this space. It is very interesting to read about. There's a whole procedure, especially if you're departing these satellite airports around there to fly GA. You got to get all this special information and content and be in contact with the controlling agency at all times. ADIZ, this is around our borders. You do have to have IFR flight plans or defense VFR flight plan to fly through them. So there's a lot of steps that go into it. Google it, learn about it. It's helpful to know what you're doing before you get in trouble. And you have to also activate with flight service and be on discrete codes when you're entering. You got to be pretty precise with when you're departing. Otherwise, they get really fussy with you about why you left later or earlier, because they want to just plan and track you and know that you're easily verifiable about who you are, so they don't have to scramble jets and other defenses. You also want to use Electronic Advanced Passenger Information System, or E Airspace, if you're going international, so that they know who the whole passenger manifest is. You don't have that, including dogs sometimes, or at least declaring dogs. I don't know. There's a whole weird thing that's happened before with animals being brought in and out. Make sure you have your papers for your animals. Make sure everyone has their passports. That's always fun when you land in Mexico and realize you don't have a passport. And that's the extent of Airspace. So thank you very much for watching. Give us a like, a share, save it, add it to a playlist. Leave comments, questions in the comments. We try to answer all the good comments that we get. We want to really help you be a safe and professional pilot and earn your own personal wings to fly around. Thank you very much for watching. T Gray out.